You're listening to Cross Rhythms Plymouth 96.3 FM, and I've got the pleasure and privilege of being joined in the studio by a wonderful guest for Life Stories. I love Life Stories, to be honest with you. I love doing this show. And it's great to have John Tozer in the studio with me. Hi, John.
Hello there, Dave.
Great to have you here.
It's great to be here and longing to share my life story, which is a long life.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You're a pretty young man by the looks of things. But we'll go into a long and varied life as we've discussed off air. You've sent us a few little notes as to some of the things you've been up to in your life, John. But let's start as we always do with these. So tell us a little bit about the start of your life, your upbringing. What was life like for you in your early days, John?
Well, shall I go back to the very beginning? In fact, to the beginning before the beginning. And I was born in 1947 in Liverpool, but just before that, I was raised as a Roman Catholic. That comes later, obviously, but my mother being a Catholic in Liverpool, she was at the St. Teresa's Church, a huge, great church, a massive church, bigger than our Guildhall. And while she was still heavily pregnant with me, she was coming down the steps, an arc of steps, out of the church, and these were the days before safety rails. And as she was coming down and got to the top step, she suddenly stumbled.
Wow. And
she started to fall forward because she was heavily pregnant with me.
Yes.
And as she was falling forward, this happened sort of in seconds, of course, she said, the baby. And suddenly she felt a pair of strong arms on her shoulder, pulled her back upright and held her steady.
Whoa.
She turned around to say thank you. There was no one there.
Wow, gosh.
That was my introduction, although I didn't know it,
to
the Ministry of Angels.
That's incredible. So a remarkable, as you say, before you were even born, a kind of way that God impacted your life and
my life,
protected you in a remarkable way that I suppose your mum was astonished by and amazed by and couldn't quite get her head around, I imagine.
Absolutely right. And of course it reminds us of Jeremiah, where God said to Jeremiah, before you were in the womb, I knew you.
Sure.
Notice this, before you were in the womb, at the very beginning of creation, even before that, God knew us, and he has his hand on our life, and I love it.
So good, so good. So tell us a bit about, I suppose, we haven't even got to your birth yet. So you're born in Liverpool, so those early childhood years, kind of where did you grow up and what was life like for you?
Well, my parents, my father was the Plymouth man, and he was in the Royal Navy, and he served during the war. From Devonport, and he was on the North Atlantic convoys, not on the convoys themselves, but on escort duty, escorting all the necessary supplies that this country needed during the war for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And there's a whole story there, but I won't go into that. But all the convoys had to come into Liverpool, western approaches, because obviously the Nazis at the time could bombard the south and the east of England. So they came into Liverpool, and that's where he met my mum on a blind date. I remember he got off the ship one day at Liverpool docks, Royal Albert docks, and his mate said, I've got a blind date for you, Jack. I said, where? He said, well, unfortunately, she hasn't turned up. I said, but I know somebody else. So he went round to Edge Hill in Liverpool, and there was my mother on a table plugging a bulb in. I said, wow, lovely legs. And from that point on, they were away, and he got married in 1943, and I came along in 1947. And I was raised as a Catholic because my mum was Catholic. My dad wasn't anything really, Church of England nominally.
Sure.
Because I was raised as a Catholic. And in 1952, after the war, we all moved to Plymouth, where my dad's family lived, and we moved into a flat at Whitley.
Great. Well, yeah, that obviously brings you to the city and where you are now, where you've been for many years. We're going to stop for some music, pick up the conversation with John after this, discuss kind of where things went for you through schooling and into early adult life and things for you after this. You're listening to Life Stories here on Cross Rhythms Plymouth, second part of my interview with John Tozer. And John, you've described a remarkable way that kind of God was involved, or a sense of divine intervention, certainly, in protecting you when your mum was pregnant with you, in an amazing story in that first section. And then, obviously, being born in Liverpool, moving down to Plymouth. So you grew up in Plymouth then. What was life like for you in terms of schooling, in terms of growing up, teenage years, all that kind of stuff?
Well, when we arrived in Plymouth in 1952, Whitley was a brand new estate. It was still, in fact, being built. It started in 1950.
Yeah.
We moved down in 52. Now, there was no schools available for me as a Catholic boy then of 5 years of age, except at St. Budo, St. Paul's Roman Catholic Primary, which is still there today.
Yes.
And I shall refer to that later on if we get an opportunity. But I went there for the first 5 years of my life, till 1957, by which time they'd opened at Brentford Avenue in Whitley, St. Peter's Catholic Primary School, and then I transferred to there for the last 1 year under Mr. Finney. He was a wonderful teacher. And so that was it. But as they raised as a Catholic,
yes,
it also meant that on a Saturday night we had to go to confession, and the priest, you say your sins, confess your sins to the priest on the other side of the mesh, and he'd say 3 Hail Marys and 4 Our Fathers or whatever it was.
All right.
And you'd come out, and it was all just ritual to me. I'd come out quickly and say, sign of the cross, 3 Hail Marys, 4 Our Fathers, and then dash back home quick. Because this went on for many years, and the reason I was doing it to get dashed back home quick was because Ready Steady Go was on the TV, and that started in August of '63, followed by Top of the Pops by the BBC in '64. But what I'm trying to say is that it was just ritual. It meant nothing to me whatsoever.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's literally was going to be my next question. Was obviously it was your kind of your mum's faith, or it was something she'd obviously grown up in.
Yeah.
Now, was it? So yeah, my question was going to be, did it mean much to you? Obviously, it was just ritual. Was there something of a sense of kind of belief in God underneath that, though, for yourself? Did you have that, or was it purely just, I do this because mum's a Catholic, because it's ritual? Was it that kind of meaningless for you?
Well, the latter there. I did this because mum's asked me to do it, me and my brother.
Right.
And in those days, it was the Latin. Latin Mass. I had a Latin Missal. I was confirmed into the church at age 8 in 1955. But it just went through it because mother told me to do it. The confessional and everything else. But no, it didn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
But as a sense of God, yes, it did.
Sure.
Although there's no personal sense. It's just like a head sense that there was a God. I remember fast forward a few years, my friend and I, we'd be walking down Milford Lane, down to Tamerton, and we'd often look up at the sky and think, you know what? There must be some God up there, a God up there somewhere. It's got to be. This lot just kind of happened just on its own. We used to philosophize like that in those days. So yes, there was a sense of God, but never meant anything to me. But anyway, I then moved on out of the primary school to St. Boniface College, which was a Roman Catholic grammar school run by the Christian Brothers. And I got a scholarship to go there by passing the 11+, the ubiquitous 11+ in those days. It. And I was there then until 1964, and then we moved on from there. So I had to attend all the Catholic rituals there too.
Yeah. So it maintained kind of Catholicism, and the traditions of that maintained a strong aspect in your life, despite it not being the kind of personal faith for you. But I love how you said you sort of philosophize about the fact there must be a God. So tell us, how did things progress for you after school? What sort of things did you get involved in? What were your interests? What was kind of life like for you as you moved forward?
Yes, well, there's a lot of interest, and I don't think we'll be able to cover all of it.
Yeah.
But by then, of course, 64, I was 17, and there were a lot of friends you'd meet in those council houses, estates in those days, and far, far better than they are today. And so you quickly make friends with everybody. Sometimes you'd lose friends, but mostly you make a lot of friends. And so we all got involved in what today we'd call community effort. And we did things like 1964, actually, we started our own wired pop station.
Okay.
Using twin flex cable, buried in the back gardens of Whitley. Some of it's still there today, folks, if you want to dig up your back garden. Actually, it's just outside your fence's back garden at Whitley Backfields. And it ran for over a quarter of a mile, this cable.
Wow.
And 15 houses were connected to it, and we ran our own little radio station, the pop stations.
That's amazing. Just completely off your own back, entrepreneurial, just sort of starting something completely new as a group of people, just for fun, essentially.
Oh, it was all done very secretively.
Yeah, of course.
Because we'd have a team of
So it's
three.
like a pirate radio station, essentially.
Well, not quite there. That would come later.
Okay.
But we did. One would use the spade to dig a slit.
Yeah.
Somebody would push the wire in, and somebody else would come along behind to cover up the slit. Wow. And that's how we put it all together. And we had bingo, and we had all sorts of things you can think of. And we had our own commercials. We recorded our own commercials on reel-to-reel tape.
Wow.
And the whole lot was featured on in 1968 on Westwood Television then, and then reprised in 1998 on West Country Television. because it's also popular. In fact, it featured in Chris Robinson's book Elizabethan Plymouth, 1952, 2002. There's photographs in there of us.
Look at that! Wow, that's an amazing little thing that you got up to in those days.
Well, that's just a wired one.
Yeah, remarkable. We're going to stop for some more music, pick up the conversation with John right after this. You're listening to Life Stories here on Cross Rhythms Plymouth. I'm in conversation with John Tozer. And John, a really fascinating part of the conversation in the last section is your early kind of dipping your toe into radio, just as a real community endeavour amongst a group of friends in and around Whitley in the 60s, just a wired radio station. But it didn't just stay there for you, did it, in terms of radio and kind of stuff you got involved in? How did that develop for you, that aspect of your life?
We were inspired because in those days, people like yourself, perhaps, Dave, will not know what the BBC was like in those days. We had the Light programme, the Home Service, radio, BBC Three, and there was nothing for the young people, or us teens of our time. And at that time, in March of 1964, I believe, on the air comes Radio Caroline, the first pirate radio ship, followed in December by Radio London, and then a whole raft of other pirate radio ships 3 miles off the coast of Essex and people like that. And they were playing the records that we loved, and we thought, we got to have some of this. Thought, but we can do better than this. We'll make our own radio station.
Wow.
So, because several of us were trained in the art of radio, not just using it, but actually making it and developing it and maintaining it, and we were, because I was a radio amateur, I am now, and I was just in the infant stages then. But we built our own radio station, old radio equipment, but it had to be portable. And with the help of an organisation at that time called Radio Free Plymouth, we, with their help, we managed to put this station together, and we called it Radio Free Plymouth. And it was mobile, so we went on the moors, we went to other places, any field somewhere. We had to keep moving around because the GPO, as they were in those days, the General Post Office, were in charge of things like that. And they would chase us down and try and DF us.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you go to court and all that, but they never did find us. Got very close a few times. But that inspiration started us to broadcast our own programmes. Which then led down to other things.
And it's hard, as you say, for myself and a kind of younger audience, it's really hard to envisage what that time was like, because radio was purely the BBC.
Yes.
Nothing else was actually legal to do in the UK and mainland UK at that point, which
Correct.
is why there's things like Radio Luxembourg, wasn't there, where people would tune into radio stations coming from other countries where maybe the rules were looser, and it was kind of the kind of commercial radio coming from particularly the US that kind of influenced those pirate stations and then changed radio in the years to come. But fascinating that you were there right at the start with
absolutely.
The kind of dawn of radio for Plymouth. So us being here in a community radio station for Plymouth is kind of interesting how that's full circle.
Well, of course, never had a commercial radio station as such, or a proper pop station, until 1975, did it, in here?
Absolutely. Well, we'll go into, probably the biggest aspect, let's be honest, the biggest aspect of your life really now, which is your faith, which is a big reason why we do Life Stories, really. And it's really interesting that you're come on here, you met with me at our showcase recently and said you wanted to do this, to share about your faith and what it means for you. That's fascinating to me because you just started this interview by saying, well, I grew up in a Catholic household and faith didn't really mean much to me. So, John, how and why did that change?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's always a sense of God, but no personal relationship with God, but a kind of a sense, and wondering that this that we're living in, this world that we're living in, it must have been created by someone. So because of that, and that being the foundation, I was working at a particular company, and I'd been there at that time for about 8 years, and I felt so frustrated, sat behind a desk, the same old job day after day. I'd go in there, I'd work, go home, have something to eat, go down to the pub, down Tamerton Foley at Westford went, and then we'd come back home, back to bed, get up, go to work, come home in the evening, have something to eat, go down the pub, and this went on. Cycle. 6 days a week I was down the pub. I wasn't a drunkard.
Sure.
Just drank a lot.
Yeah.
No,
but I suppose it just gave you a sense of social life, didn't it? And it was just the same old pattern of life.
Yeah, you go down there, pack of KP nuts, playing darts, cards, whatever was going down at that time. Whatever. And those days the pubs closed at 10:30, so, you're limited to time. But that's what the life was like. And I frustrated. There must be something more to life than what I've got now.
Yes.
And what happened then, due process, in 1973, the beginning in 1973, the company introduced what they called twilight working, which meant they extended the factory. If anybody wanted to, they could work on the machines in the factory for 4 hours between 6 and 10.
Right.
Well, I volunteered for that because me and a pal had plans to go to America. We wanted to go. I've always had a desire to go to America for many, many years.
Sure.
I won't tell you the reasons why. I won't go into that, but nothing wrong. It's just that too much detail. But so I joined the twilight shift in 1973. Mm-hmm. I was working 4 or 5 nights a week. So I worked my office job, 7, 8 hours, whatever it was, 1 hour break on the factory then for 4 hours. Wow. And I did this for 6 months, saving money to go to America.
Sure.
Finally, I got to America on September the 13th, 1973. And then we went all over the place. All over the place. You name it, we went to San Francisco, Las Vegas, the tall trees, the meteor crater, the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls, you name it. We covered all those main bases. And when I came back, I was sat behind the desk and I was bored again.
Yeah.
And then later on, long story short, 1974 rolled around, January the 1st, I went to see Jesus Christ Superstar.
Okay. Which,
as of the time of recording, is a show in Plymouth, I think, at the moment.
Sure.
And I was impressed, so impressed with the music. I loved the music that I went and bought the album and they got the words on the sleeve. So then I took it to a person who I knew as a Christian in the office. I said, look at the words on this. This is great music. And he said, well, let's see what it says in the Bible, John. And he started to compare the two. I thought, hey, yo. I thought, what's he doing with that Bible? And then he picked up on that. And he said, have you not got a Bible? I said, no. He said, I'll buy you one. And he did. And I started reading it. And where do you start in a book? Right at the very beginning.
Yes.
And I started reading Genesis, and I got so bogged down in those first 11 chapters, I couldn't get through it. I was going up to the library and researching. I found that the books about science and things like that were contradicting each other. I got so frustrated. This went on for 6 months.
Yeah.
And in the end, I got to July of that year, 1974. And there was a man in the store, Albert by name, I can name him. When I mention other people's names, I'll only use false names to protect the innocent.
Yeah.
But Albert, he was a Jew. Lovely, lovely man. He said, John, why didn't you come to our church one day? I said, not me, Albert, I'm a Catholic. You won't catch me going down there. Hypocrite.
Sure.
But anyway, 2 weeks factory break for maintenance, everyone home on holiday. At the end of it, I got to go down. I don't want to let Albert down. He's such a lovely man. So I went down to the church and I sat at the back, nearest the door to get out quick, as you do. And I thought, these people got something. Wow, I wish I had what they had. They're so happy. They seem so happy, and I feel this lovely sense of warmth here.
Yeah.
And I didn't do anything. When he left, 8 o'clock, went straight down the pub.
Yeah.
3 weeks went by. And then I felt an urge deep inside to go back again. So I went back again, sat a bit nearer to the front this time. And that night, the pastor answered all my questions which had been developed in my head for the previous 3 weeks. And I thought, who's been talking to him about me? Now I know who's been talking to him about me. God was. Anyway, left me thoroughly disarmed. Anyone want to give their life to Jesus? Long story short, I put my hand up and said, me.
Yeah.
And then I felt a presence come into my life. Couldn't describe it at that time, but I can now, and I could soon after, that Jesus had come into my life, and I felt as though I was floating on air.
That's awesome. That's so amazing, John. Well, we'll stop for some music and talk more about that experience. Yes. And kind of what happened since and what happened to you after that, what it looked like to actually live that experience out in the years to come. Talk more with John right after this. You're listening to Cross Rhythms Plymouth 96.3 FM into the fourth part of our interview here with John Tozer. It's great to be chatting with you, John. It's a real privilege, as it always is, to do these Life Stories interviews. If you've just tuned in, you have to check out the website, crossrhythms.co.uk/Plymouth, or go to our YouTube where you'll be able to watch it again or listen again from the start to this conversation with John. So, John, in that last section, you were describing how, for you, faith became real, that your connection to God coming to believe in Jesus and accept him into your life was something you decided to do. I was really fascinated by the kind of lead up to that, because it really was a sense of someone dissatisfied with the day-to-day rhythms of life and thinking there must be more. You were really in a place of seeking for what life was really all about, weren't you?
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. And sorry.
No, absolutely. I mean, and that's kind of what led you to that draw to I suppose, follow up what your friend said of come to my church, because you were thinking, well, what have I got to lose here, I suppose, in that sense, and there may be some answers. Is that fair to say?
Yes, as well. But he was also a very lovely man, and I hate disappointing people.
Sure.
I make a promise to somebody, I want to fulfill it, and that's also part of the reason. But you hit on it when you said I was seeking, and that is the key, really, to anyone finding a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, is you start seeking. If you don't seek, you won't find out. What's that scripture say? Seek, those who seek me will find me. The scripture says you got to start seeking. You're sitting on the sidelines and thinking, well, where's God then? Why didn't he come to me? Start seeking for him.
Yeah.
You make that first step, God will take 9 steps towards you. But anyway, after I left the church that day, instead of going down to the pub on the 18th of August 1974, 50 years ago, instead of going down to the pub as I usually did 6 nights a week, remember, my day off was Monday night. I didn't go down to the pub on Monday night. I went straight home, the south way we lived then. And I walked in, and my father looked at me. He looked at the clock on the mantelpiece, 8:15. He looked back at me. He said, what are you doing here? Does the pub run out of beer?
Yeah.
I said, no, Dad, I gave my life to Jesus tonight. And my mum turned around and moaned about the Catholic faith and that sort of thing. But that's how it really started. But the following morning, of course, it's a Monday, I went into the office, and I'd only been just sat down to do my job. And next thing you know, bang, door. There's 2 doors in the office. One of the doors opened, and in comes somebody. Here, what's this here about you? I said, what? Then the other door opened, another 2 men came in. What's this here about you going to church last night? Within 2 or 3 minutes, there were 8 of them in an arc, surrounding me and firing questions at me about, you going to church? We've heard you going. I thought, who told them?
Yeah.
Word got out somehow. And then fired the usual chestnuts, Adam and Eve and Noah and the ark and all these sort of. I said, guys, I can't answer your questions. All I know is that Jesus came into my life last night, and my life has changed. It's the best thing I've ever done. You know what? They just all drifted away, rather like they did when Jesus, with the woman and found in adultery. They just drifted away. And I went over to the other office to talk to some of my new Christian friends.
Yeah.
So it went on from there.
Yeah. I love how you said this, and it's been true for anyone I've interviewed, that there's always real commonality in much of the life stories. The way Jesus becomes real to people, comes into their lives, and it's something that to an extent you can explain. You can say what you've said on the radio here, but kind of until you've experienced it, as you say, unless you're seeking, unless you're really asking those questions, unless you're really looking, and then you've experienced it, it's hard to properly explain, isn't it? So
yes,
as you say, those people, maybe you giving what you found might have spurred them on to find him later in life. But at that time, they were like, what does that mean? I don't really understand what you're talking about.
No, absolutely right. Yes.
And how did that kind of develop for you? Were you then kind of connected to that church that you'd visited, and kind of what developed for you in life from there?
Well, yes, being the church then that, as we say, got saved in. In fact, I gave my life to Jesus, and Jesus came in to my life. Yeah. That's the church then became my established church. And in fact, I'm still there today. Great. And there've been a few drifting away here and there, now and then, for different reasons. But they've been minor. But for essentially, I've been there for 50 years. Wow. In August. But this is one of the things you're told is when you get saved, or advised, not told, you're never told how God leads your life. One of the things you're advised is to seek fellowship in the church. Yes. Read the Bible. Yes. Pray. Yeah. And one of the other things is to testify. Give testimony to what God has done in your life. Well, for me, that first time that happened was 3 weeks later. A dear friend of mine, so this would be like the first week of September, he came out and he said, all right, John, let's go down the pub then. Fancy go down the pub? No, I hesitated, because what I've forgotten to tell you is that when I gave my life to Jesus on the 18th of August, 74, immediately my desire for drinking stopped, which is why I went home.
Sure.
Because I used to drink, as I said, 6 nights a week.
Sure.
I had no interest whatsoever in drink. It just went.
And I guess, just to pick up on that very quickly before you carry on, I imagine, as you've described it, the way and the reason, like a lot of people, most people drink, when they drink habitually like that, it's to sort of have an escape. It's to have some sort of like lifeline in life that otherwise, as you described before, you're kind of dissatisfied in. There wasn't much enjoyment. Suddenly when Jesus comes into your life, you feel a sense of joy and life and exuberance that, well, the alcohol, I don't need that anymore. Was that kind of your experience?
Just spot on. I had something far better.
Sure.
You know, the people who are still unsaved, or still do these sort of things, that's the only life they know. But Jesus gives you something far better.
Yeah.
So why would it go back to the old?
And specifically talking about alcohol, I don't know who's said this quote, but there's a fairly famous quote that alcohol very nearly works. So as in, you know, it kind of takes away the pain, or it masks the pain, or it gives you an escape, or it gives you some sense of fun to a little extent for a little while, and then you're left with the hangover, and then you have to start again, and you've got all of the negative sides of drinking as well. Whereas finding Jesus has something far deeper than that, and far superior than that lasts, and you don't get the hangover in that sense.
No, absolutely. It's the same with drugs. So you can be on a high, and you come down out of the drugs, and you're left looking for the next high. But with Jesus, you can be on a permanent high as long as you lock into him.
That's amazing.
It doesn't mean to say you're floating around on cloud 9 all the time, or everything's happy and glorious.
Totally.
Life is life. There will be difficulties, there will be trials, but Jesus will carry you through. And so I went down to the pub with him. Remember, God had taken away the drinking, and also he had taken away all my swearing, all my, what do they say, effing and blinding, is that the phrase?
Sure.
And my blaspheming, all gone. He cleaned up my mouth, cleaned up my liver, cleaned up everything about me. So I went down there to Tamerton, and he ordered whatever it was. He had a double diamond or something. He turned and he said, "Right, John, what do you want?" I said, "Orange juice." He said, "What?" I said, "Orange juice." He said, "Oh, all right." So I went over and sat down. He got the drinks. He came over and he said, "What's all this about then?" So I was able to testify to him and tell him what it was all about. 5 months later, that whole scenario is repeated in the same pub with another friend of mine. And I was able to testify to him as to what happened in my life back in August 1974. So my life had started to develop from that point onwards.
Love that. Well, that's a perfect place to stop this section. We'll pick up the conversation with John after this. You're listening to Cross Rhythms Plymouth 96.3 FM, and I'm in conversation with John Tozer. And John, I love that you know, the theme, I suppose, so far of your life stories is just a really honest search for what life's about, finding what you experienced of a real huge difference to that, and a real answer to that in receiving Jesus into your life for yourself. And we're going to go into now some of the really grounded, rooted ways in which God has guided your life and been there for you through very practical things, very normal things in your life. So do you want to tell us a bit about kind of moves you made after this point in terms of changing jobs and the ways in which God guided you through that process, which is a process everyone has to go through, but you had a sense of God being with you through that. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, yes, I was at this particular company for 30 years, or bar 6 months. But it was back in 1983 when I was what they call a section leader of a particular department there. The department had 2 section leaders. I was one and my friend was another one. And one particular Friday afternoon it was in July of 1983. And the manager called me into the office. He said, "John," he said, "I want to let you know that there's a golden opportunity coming up in a new department."
Right.
I said, "Okay." He said, "We think you'd be the ideal man for it." I said, "Okay." So what is it? He said, "We don't know." I said, "You asked me to go to a job, I don't know what it is, and you don't know what it is."
Yeah.
He says, "That's right, but I promise you it's going to be a golden opportunity, and you should take a decision now." I said, "I'm not making a decision now on a Friday at 4:15. No, I'm sorry, but my life courses do not change on a decision made on a Friday afternoon."
Yes, of course.
He argued a toss, but in the end, he agreed with me. I'd let him know on Monday. So, what do? As a Christian, I go home and I pray about it. And the Lord gives me 1 Peter 5 verse 6, which says, Humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, and he will exalt you in due course. So I go in on Monday, and I tell him I'll take the job. He said, oh, very wise decision. Anyway, I moved in due course of time into this new office, which turned out to be involved with work study, that time and motion, that sort of job. It was brilliant. The best job I've ever had. Loved it. I absolutely loved it. But anyway, after about 18 months, the manager of that department called me and he said, John, he said, I've been watching your work and you're doing very well. So I'm going to give you another £10 a week, which is about £40 a week today. And I'm going to make you the supervisor of the office. Remember what God said? I will exalt you in due course. Sure. Supervisor of the office instead of section leader. Loved it. So that was the change there.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I love how very real and tangibly you felt a sense of God's guidance to make and help you in that decision.
Absolutely.
Something you said earlier is, I think, really relevant, is that, you come to faith in Jesus and your life changes, you get a real sense of life and joy and peace in your heart, but it's not always happy-go-lucky. It's not always just everything goes well. Tell us a bit about how things moved on for you work-wise, and you actually got made redundant. You weren't immune from that as a Christian. That happened to you. Tell us a bit about that story.
I wasn't actually made redundant. The firm I was at, during the time I was there, had 3 lots of redundancies within the 30-year period or so that I was there.
Yeah.
And the Lord guided me through all of them. One particular one, in fact, one of the last ones, before they penned a notice on the board saying the firm needs to let go of 40 people or whatever it is. And before that happened, I'd been transferred to another department in the factory because the man who was there was on long-term sick. In reality, he never came back to work.
Sure.
So I was asked to fill in down there. So then the notice was published. People need to panic. People say, oh, it's not me. I'm not going to be made redundant. I've got a family and all that sort of thing. You can imagine what goes on when such a notice appears on the board.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was safe because I was down the other end doing a job that no one else could do. But after the dust settled, I came back up into the office and took up my old job again. And I was there for 2 years. And to be honest, Dave, I was bored because the type of job I was in, as I said, was work, study, time, and motion.
Sure.
Once everything, all the standards, as we call it, is set up, it's not much to do. So I only had about 2 hours work a day, nursing maintenance, making sure this is right, that's right, whatever's right.
Yeah.
And I got bored. And then suddenly the manager came to me one day. It was in September of 1994. He called me into his office. He said, look, long story short, would you, if the company were to put something together, would you consider a deal if he made you medically discharged, but not redundant, medically discharged? I said, well, I'll consider it. See what you can do. Feeling in my heart that was the right thing to say.
Sure, yeah.
He said, well, I'll go and have a word with the managing director and we'll reconvene next week. I said, okay. Well, meanwhile, I went to the car park in my car at lunchtime and I had a word with my managing director.
Yeah.
And my managing director said, take it. They will offer you 1 year's salary, tax-free. Take it. Immediately I'm saying, this company doesn't offer things like that. Because they've been there for so long, they don't offer generous things like that. No, they don't. The Lord simply said, they will offer you 1 year's salary, tax-free. Take it. Went back in, reconvened the following week. He came back. He said, I've had a word with the managing director and the company's prepared to offer you 1 year's salary, tax-free. Of course, you imagine inside, I was so excited.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, okay, then I'll take it then. And they let me go in Christmas of 1994. I stayed on deliberately that long to help out with a few things, and also because we had a fat Christmas bonus that Christmas. And so I left on 23rd of December 1994.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's amazing to hear how God guided you through that as well. We're going to stop us music, come back with the final part of this Life Stories interview with John, in which we'll touch on some other aspects of his life and where God's guided him through that, including pasties, which we'll tease for now and get to very shortly. You're listening to Life Stories, and unfortunately it's the final part of my interview here with John. With everyone I interview John, I feel like we could have far more time, and I certainly feel like that here. There's loads more we could cover, but tell us a little bit about you touched in that last section. You took a sort of medical redundancy essentially from your work. Had a real sense of God's provision even through what is potentially a difficult step for people. But as kind of things went on, you ended up on benefits. So I guess to our point in the last section, it wasn't that you were immune from challenge. You're on benefits. Money was hard to come by.
Yeah.
A kind of cool little story within that, though, of God kind of leading you. Tell us a little bit about that and a particular story about pasties within that, Tom.
Yes, well, yeah. Well, we launched into 1995. And, of course, I had 1 year salary tax-free. And that obviously sees you by for a good year or more.
Yeah.
And but, of course, the money runs out. And then you have to go on to benefits, which I hated doing because I like to work for a living. But because I had arthritis, still got arthritis, and various other things came along after that. But it was difficult to do any physical kind of work. So eventually I have forced to sign on to disability benefits and things like that. Anyway, the benefits, as anyone who's been on benefits will know, are very meagre. They just keep you going. Now, one particular afternoon, I was at the bottom of Cornwall Street and near Ivy Judeney's, and I was just walking. It was just walking past, and you could smell these freshly baked pasties, and I was so hungry, so hungry. And the Lord said to me, spoke to me clearly. He said, "Go in and ask for a free pasty." I can't do that. But the Lord doesn't argue with you. He just said, "Go in and ask for a free pasty." So anyway, bold as brass, I went in. There's no customers in there, just 3 staff, 3 ladies.
Yeah.
And I said, this is the very words I said. Jolly like. I said, "I don't suppose you're giving away any free pasties today?" And they said, "Oh, you cheeky apeth." They said, "Just for your cheek, you can have one. Here you go." And that's how I got my free pasties for Ivy Judeney's.
I love that. I love how, it's a fun little story, but just a way in which, again, God was there for you in something that seems insignificant, but God really does care about every aspect of your life.
Amen.
For you through that. So I guess as a final little story in that, tell us a bit about a thing that could have gone a lot worse for you, St. Paul's, and a fall, and another time in which you felt and you were, by experience, protected in a way. Tell us about that.
Indeed, it was. On 1st of November 2017, went back to the school I mentioned earlier, my first primary school, St. Paul's at St. Budo, and for a reunion event of some kind. But when I left, these days they got big iron gates and fences. And this particular security gate, it must have weighed about 1/4 of a ton. And remember, I'm arthritis, and I'm on a walking stick. In reception, they open the gate so you can get out. But as I was sort of swinging around to get through the gate swings back on me and pushes me backwards.
Right.
And there's a small pavement there. Pavement must have been about 4 or 5 feet wide. And I've got my walking stick in one hand, and the gate did knock me back, and I'm going back like this. I quickly look behind, and I see a curb coming up behind me, about an 8-inch curb drop, and the tarmac surface. I know instantly, this all happened very quickly, of course. I know instantly I'm going down.
Yes.
And I don't know if I'm going to survive this. I honestly thought death is coming to me earlier than I thought. Honestly, it did. So anyway, the curb comes up, and over I go, flying down on my back. And as I go down, crashing down, suddenly, inches from the tarmac, I feel a hand under my head, back of my head, and just lowers me gently to the tarmac. And I just lay there shocked. Just before then, as I was coming out the gate, I saw a minibus go up my lane. Now, this is the back lane, if you know the school.
Yeah.
Nobody ever goes there unless they have to, perhaps take the children to school. Deserted. But a minibus guy had just gone up and had parked a few yards up the road. So I'm laying on the ground. They saw what happened. They get out, and what should be in the minibus but a nurse. And then, and the nurse comes out and helps into the school. My daughter comes over from work, and she takes me to the Cumberland Centre, where they checked my head and said, nothing, because any head injury is a priority.
Of course.
And they said, just a few scratches on the top of the head, that's all.
Wow. An
angel stopped me from cracking my skull open on that tarmac.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's a wonderful story, John, to go with what's been a wonderful interview of just you sharing, and I know you really wanted to do this, kind of just, let's be honest, the stage of life you're at, that you wanted to give glory to God and share testimony of what you've experienced from those days many years ago of first saying, yeah, I've searched for what life's about. I believe it's Jesus. I've accepted Jesus. Yeah. And actually, he's been faithful to you through all those ways. Big things like work, job changes, little things like getting a free pasty and everything in between. God's been there for you. So what would you say, John, to those people who are listening to this, who are maybe at that stage you were many years ago of searching, or maybe just feeling disillusioned, dissatisfied with what life has to offer? What would you say to those people?
Well, the Christian faith is a faith. Faith essentially means, what does it say in Hebrews? About believing in something, even though at the time it seems impossible. Now, if I may illustrate, imagine I've got a bottle of water. It's a well-known brand. It looks okay. Nobody's ever told me that this brand is wrong and that sort of thing. I go through all the process. Should I drink it? Should I not drink it? The only way to find out whether it's going to be any good is to taste it. So I take the top off and stop it. Oh, it's brilliant. I've not been hurt by it whatsoever. It's a brilliant drink because I've tasted it and found it to be true, even though all the evidence was there and I had a few doubts. And it's the same with God, really. You've just got to, the evidence is here. Creation's all around us. Now, I can't go into it now, but trust me, I've been doing studies on creation since 1978.
Yeah.
I love it. And the intricate details of God's creation are fantastic. And all I can say is when you look into that detail, the evidence is there. In fact, the Bible says it's there. And so if you want to trust God, just take a leap of faith. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And to do that, you've got to try him. When you try him, then you know. Jesus said, you'll know the works that I do. You know the things that I do by the works that I do. So Jesus said, effectively, trust in me. Then you'll know. Then you'll know. And that's what people should do. I advise you, please, guys, do it. Taste and see that the Lord is good. It's the best thing you'll ever do in your life. It happened to me 50 years ago, and I've never changed or gone back to the old life I had, because what I've got is far, far better.
I love that. I love that. That's the place to leave it. John, thank you so much for your time, and we wish you all the best.